Cool. Yeah, so let's talk about module development in Drupal 7. A little bit about me. I am an IT specialist at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I previously worked for Vox Global, which is a member of the Fleischmann-Hillard family, and High Rock Studios. Professionally, I've been working with Drupal for 2 years. So we are going to cover module development. What are modules? Why you should write modules? What is the hook system? Some resources. Take questions, and then actually work through writing a module. So what are modules? Modules are the building blocks of Drupal. They're encapsulated functionality. And when I say encapsulated, that's a programmer word for neatly packaged. There can also be frameworks and APIs. So you can write a module that allows other modules to do things and expose functionality. Migrate, for example, is one. So why should you modularize your code? I said it before, but code encapsulation is a big one. I had a tendency when I first started developing in Drupal to throw a bunch of logic in the TPL files. That's not a good thing to do. It is really messy. It's hard to maintain. When you write it as a module, again, everything's all in the same place, so you can enable it and disable it. You can also cleanly extend core or other contributed modules. Drupal has a great API for just that. It prevents you from breaking others' codes. It preserves the upgrade path. There's actually a whole page on Drupal.org about hacking the core. And hacking in this case does not mean nefarious logging into other people's systems. It's just a word used by programmers to talk about sloppy coding. It also allows you to share your code because it is a module. You can put it up on Drupal.org or GitHub. Other people can pull it down and use it. Your code can be extendable. The hook system, which we'll talk about later on, is you can actually create your own hooks in your modules. One other thing that's not on the slides but is very important, if you write your modules, you can actually break down your code. So again, if you're in the TPL or if you're writing custom code, who knows where, all of your logic is generally spread out through these templates, and who knows what part does this. But if you write your modules, you can actually basically write a module for everything you're trying to do. So instead of writing one monolithic module, so my custom module, you have a module for each little bit of the requirements, which I like personally because it makes it easier to maintain. So give me 1 second. Let me see if the Wi-Fi is working. Okay. All right, so modules and themes. How do modules and themes play together? Simply put, you should make things work using modules, and you should make things pretty using themes. Developing modules allows you to keep logic out of your themes, and again, this is a really big thing. When I started out, I would love to just throw stuff in the TPL files because it was easy, but there's a couple problems with that. One, if you change themes, your site breaks. It's really good to not be theme dependent. Obviously, you're going to have to move blocks around and stuff like that, but if you can write modules, you can really clean up your theme. This is called separation of concerns. You'll hear this a lot. In other words, it just means the theme does the theming, modules make the site work. There's other reasons, but again, big thing is it allows you to write maintainable, clean code, which doesn't seem like a big thing when you're first starting out. But when you start getting into enterprise level Drupal sites where you have 50,000 nodes and the code base is maintained by multiple people, really maintaining a clean code base helps with that. So modules dissected. What actually makes up a module? In its simplest, it can be broken down into a folder designated by the machine name of the module. So in this case, for example, we have sites, all modules, dev, my module. Quick note, you'll notice that there's a /dev there. Drupal's module scanning is recursive. When I say that, it means that you can put your own custom folders within Drupal's modules folder, and it'll still find it. So what I typically do is I'll have /dev for anything that I'm developing, /features. Again, it just helps you maintain it easier, and it's easier to find things. Moving down, within that folder, you have an info file, again, designated by the machine name of the module, so my_module.info. And finally, the module file, designated by the machine name of the module. Again, this is at its simplest, the minimal parts that you would need to create a module. So, the info file. The info file describes your module. You should at least put name, description, package, and core. This is the file that Drupal will look to populate the modules page on, and it will also, again, describe some other requirements. So, the name. There's two names with a module. There's the machine name and the name that's described in the info file. In this case, Wi-Fi dropped out again. The name describes your friendly name, your username, user-friendly name of the module. So, for example, name equals my module. Moving on, we have description. Wi-Fi picked back up again. We have description. So, description describes your module. This will also show up on the module page. So, for example, this is my module. Don't mind the syntax highlighting there. For some reason, it really likes my. So package, this is the category of your module. So on the modules page, especially if you're using module filter, you'll be able to see each group of modules. So user interface, views. Anyway, this is how you group your modules together. Important note is that this is a string, so it's very important that you type it the same. Otherwise, you'll get some weird stuff where it'll show the same group twice, and you click on it and it'll show it. So again, it's a string, so type it exactly as you want it. Core. Core is the major version of Drupal core that your module is designed for. You actually do not put in the minor version. Again, so in this case, it would be 7.x means it works for all versions of Drupal 7. Version. You can also describe version in your info file. This is only used when your module is not on Drupal.org. So if you're doing just a custom module that'll never make it to the light of day, you can specify a version here. Really all it does is it helps other developers. And so on the module page, this will actually show up. And again, it's a string. So typically you'll do the version of Drupal followed by some versioning system. In this case, 7.x-1.0. So dependencies. Right, dependencies is an array, and while it's array syntax, this is an info file, listing all the modules that your module depends on. Quick note, you do not need to list the dependencies of your dependencies. So for example, the views module has a dependency on chaos tools. You don't need to do that, you just need to list your direct dependencies, and Drupal will be able to actually go down the dependency tree. Scrolling down, configure is an optional property. This is very helpful if you have an admin page set up. You can actually specify the path, and it will actually add a configure link on the module page. So in this case, admin/config/content/my-module. And here's a tiny example. So name, description, core, package, version. Moving on, the module file is it's where all the code happens. It is the file that Drupal always loads for enabled modules. And I stress always because you should really try to put only your bootstrap code and your hooks in your .module file. Anything else that can be spread out should be spread out. And the reason why I emphasize this is if you've got a site with 100 modules, 200 modules, and you have, well, let's say 100 enabled, Drupal's going to load up 100 module files for every request. So if every module developer put all of their code in that module file, you'd get a lot of code bloat. So that's something that kind of struck me when I was first learning module development. So yeah, something to keep in mind. And in the documentation on Drupal.org, you'll see a lot of times when you can have callback files. So when you can split your code out. Let's see here. So the hook system. Yes, this is very nebulous at first because hooks are part of Drupal code. Modules, they're discrete. You can install them, you can see them. Hooks, on the other hand, well, in short, it provides access points to Drupal's response cycle. It's used by modules and themes. Specifically for themes, you can do some pre-processing stuff, and Drupal exposes hooks. It's like a roll call. We'll get to this in a second, but in code, you'd have function, whatever's calling that hook, underscore, whatever the hook name is, followed by parameters. So in a very simple example, my module underscore menu. So how does the hook system work? Well, at certain points in Drupal's response cycle, Drupal and other modules with hooks will run all functions that access that hook. So again, I said it's somewhat nebulous. I only say that because it took me forever to understand what actually the hook system is. So let's say we're ordering a pizza. I'm not actually going to order a pizza, but if we were ordering a pizza, let's say I'm Drupal core and everyone in here is a module. So I'm about to order a pizza, but we have to figure out what kind of pizza we want. So we have a hook called pre-order. So I'm going to go, let's say Nick. I'm only picking on Nick because I actually know him. Nick, what kind of pizza do you want? Pepperoni pizza. So that was the hook. I'm Drupal core. Nick is a module. I'm just saying, hey, I'm about to order a pizza. Let's check with Nick and see what he wants. So in the case of Drupal, again, it is during the response cycle, it's just going to go to your modules, and any one of those modules that is accessing that hook, it'll run the code. So I actually have a PHP implementation of the Drupal hook system on GitHub. Again, this is technically an explanation of it. It's not for an explanation of Drupal's hook system. Again, the key takeaway here is if you're really curious in code how it works, there's the repo right there. And it's actually, it relies on function exists because Drupal 7, of course, is still procedural. So, hook system. Before we move ahead, did that pizza example make any sense? Feeling pretty good? Feeling pretty good? Because we'll get back to it because we're going to write a module. But again, just think of it like this. The hook system is merely checkpoints so that Drupal can allow its response to be configured and extended. There is an edge case that I've come across. Some modules will not actually use the hook system at all. For example, a module that loads a PHP library into memory. And again, remember that Drupal will always load the contents of that module when it's enabled into memory and in global scope. So if you have a PHP library that does DOM parsing server-side, you could write a module that, again, it just loads up that library in the .module file, and then in other modules you can make use of that library. Again, this is an edge case. You won't normally see this, but it's something to keep in mind. So, some resources. The top one for me personally is Google, which may sound silly, but I found that Drupal.org search actually is not as good as Googling it. And typically what I'll do, my favorite thing to Google is programmatically blah, blah, blah. So let's say we wanted to figure out how to make a block in Drupal. So Drupal, if I could type Drupal 7 program at Kelly, create a block. Of course, this example depends on the internet working. We'll come back to, there we go. So it's got great spelling too. So you'll see here that it's pulled up quite a few examples. Again, I use the word programmatically. because that differentiates it from the UI. So you can create blocks going to the admin screen. But by throwing that word in there, you generally get examples about with modules or anything like that. So that's one resource that, again, I constantly go to. There's a Drupal.org module development guide. That's very helpful to reference and, again, look at the best practices. Drupal APIs reference, which we'll get to in a second. Drupal APIs reference, it's not very navigation friendly because it's an API. So I'd still recommend using Google, but you need to be familiar with the API reference. Drupal Answers is a Stack Exchange site, much like Stack Overflow, and then also Stack Overflow. Although, again, with Drupal Answers, you probably go to that before you go to Stack Overflow. So those are some resources. Before we move on, does anybody have any questions about the contents of the slides that you've seen so far? Yes, sir.
The .info file, there's another, I think you might have skipped over it. There's a way to sort of set up what the path will be to this module.
In the file system or on the...
No, to the browser. You know, something that you could just enter and there's your module.
Right, so what I typically do is use configure.
Okay.
But again, that's for a configuration link. So that's not what you're referring to. Okay, well, I tell you what, we'll take a look at the API docs. So,
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, again, the Wi-Fi was kind of cutting out, so I have a slide in here that's a shameless plug, but again, without Wi-Fi, it kind of blew a hole in my plan. I wrote a little thingy over the weekend that allows me to control my slides, Reveal.js slides, using socket connections from my phone. Some of you saw it earlier when I was on my phone and moving the slides. Again, with the Wi-Fi cutting out, it wasn't working, but if you want to check it out, I'd recommend it because I wrote it. So let's code a module. Right, so let's get down to it. I'm going to pull up a local site that I have. It's pretty much a standard Drupal site. So let's go to Finder. All right, so let's get clean Drupal site. So sites, all modules. Sites, all modules. So right now, obviously, I have some other stuff in here. I'm going to create a new folder called Pizza. Okay, so I'm going to hop over to my text editor, and of course the text is huge. All right, so let's go to sites, all modules, pizza. Let's go ahead and fill out two things, pizza.info and pizza.module. Okay, so if we go back to our slides, let's actually jump back to our info file. So we take a look, here's some basic stuff that we need. And I'm just going to copy this over and fill it out accordingly. Pizza module. Again, this is the user-friendly name. Description describes our module, and a lot of these properties will show up on the module page for your site. Pizza module. Drupal 7 package is, we'll leave it as Matt. 1x, that's good. And we don't have a configuration page. So there is a hook called hook menu. Let's actually take a look at the API docs. So all right, so hook menu. Hook menu allows you to create a I'm going to say page in code. I say page hesitantly because Drupal has, you can have a page content type. This is not actually creating a node. This is simply registering a route with Drupal's router to return a response. So if you wanted to create a configuration page, if you wanted to just create a module page, or any kind of page in code, page again meaning that when I go to this URL, I see this content. This is how you do it. Again, it's not in the node system, so you're not actually going to get a node ID or anything like that. But I'm going to use this as an example because it's a pretty simple one. So we take a look at it, and this is again Drupal's API. So we're looking at Drupal 7. We see here that it is called hook menu in Drupal's API docs. Wherever you see hook, you should replace it with the machine name of your module or theme or whatever is calling this hook. So ours would be pizza_menu. And then you'll also see, if applicable, any parameters that you pass in. This one does not have any. So we see some example code, and they actually walk through it. This one's pretty wordy because there's a lot you can do with hook menu. The key thing here is this. So this is what we need to take a look at. So in hook menu, you specify an array called items, and then any part of that array or any index in that array is the path or route or URL for your page. So let's go ahead and start coding. So function, let's turn on syntax highlighting. Function pizza_menu. Again, we're not passing anything in. So we got items. Bouncing through languages. So array. And then we need to put a $sign because it's PHP, and then also return items. So this is our basic code for hook menu. Again, we're specifying this items, array of arrays, and anything that's a index is going to be a page route. So pizza would register for /pizza. So let's see here. Let's take a look at some of these properties. So another thing to look for is anything that has required next to the property. So in this case, title is required. It doesn't look like anything else is, but we're going to specify more than just title. So I'm going to throw title in here using array syntax, pizza. Page callback, this is the function that will be used to generate the content for our page. So let's go ahead and do pizza. I think it's in quotes actually. I'm actually going to reference my other module example I did. Yeah, so oddly enough, this is actually quoted, even though it is a function name. So pizza show page. Again, Drupal 7 procedural, just by convention. I like to throw my module's name in front of every other function because everything's in global scope. So pizza show page is the callback. We don't have any arguments, so you could optionally pass in stuff to your callback function. We're not going to do that because, again, we just want to see a simple page, a simple pizza page. So taking a look here, access callback. So this is the access properties is how you specify who can see your page. So again, I'm going to jump back over to this one. So we're going to say anyone who can access content. So access arguments, anyone who can access content. And then that is actually, well, And then another thing is the type. So if we scroll down, type. There's a couple of them. Again, this is tied to Drupal's menu system. So it's a little weird in that sense that if you want to create a page, you're actually creating it through the menu system. There's a couple options here. Normal item, local task. So normal item, again, it's in the menu tree. Can actually be moved around. Local task is something I've used, again, when I'm creating an admin page, so a configuration page. You can actually pipe separate these properties. So you can do menu normal item, pipe, menu local task if it's a configuration page. And then that way you'd actually see it on these menus here. So let's see, what's a good example? So you can see here comments. In this case, comments is a local task. So if you were to create a configuration page, you can pipe separate them. So menu normal item, menu local task. And that way you get it as a page and also as a tab or within the admin menu. So that's just something to keep in mind, that you can pipe separate these. I believe it's pipe separated. I have to double check. You can put in multiple values. So we're going to use normal item, I think, is actually the default. Yeah, so normal item is assumed, so you don't have to specify it. So this is very simple, but let's go ahead. Pizza, sure. So another thing to keep in mind, you'll notice I started to type print, and then I changed it to return. This is the pizza page. Right, so the reason why I didn't hit print, if you print stuff from your callback function, it will actually skip Drupal's theming layer. So you're supposed to return whatever you want to show from your callback, as opposed to actually printing it or rendering it directly. So I'm going to return, this is the pizza page. Let's see, that should be a basic module. So let's see if I missed a semicolon or something like that. So I'm going to pull up my modules page. All right, so Matt, go over here, pizza module, turn it on. Uh-oh, something blew up. Now the question is, unexpected, line 15. So what did I do here? Semicolon. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, so it said it enabled it. Let's try. Okay, that's great. We've got a very, very simple module. There's one thing I'd like to do though. As I mentioned before, the module file is always loaded. So we're going to want to throw this callback function into an include file. So let's do pizza page.inc. So what I'm going to do here is take this function, pull it out, do it here, save it, save that, and then using our callback property, or our file property, I think it is. Alright, let's see here. File. So we can see here it says file is a file that would included before the page callback is executed. Again, this is just from a structure standpoint. I really like doing this. So we're going to throw a file property in here. And since it's in the same level, we should be able to just do pizza.page.inc. One thing you're going to have to do though is clear the cache a lot. If you've got drush going, just drush cc all. Since this is just a simple site, we'll go ahead and do it the other way. So in performance, you can hit clear cache. Whenever you clear the cache, that should clean everything up. So especially when you define new hooks. So if we were to go in here and do another hook, so hook block info, clear cache, so it'll actually register that hook with Drupal. So so it did the same thing, but let's see if okay, so you can see what we've done here is we've moved our callback code into its own file. And again, this has several benefits, one of them being smaller pieces, easier to maintain. It won't load it for every request, so it's only going to load this callback file when it hits this. So that's good. So now that we've got a very simple module, does anybody have questions about what we've done so far? Yes, sir.
If you wanted multiple files, would you put them in here, or would you put them in like a high-level file that could include those, require or include those?
So when you say multiple files, so let's say if we had some logic in this file and some logic in a different file, but we wanted to include it. I don't know if you can actually pipe separate multiple files. You might be able to.
Well, if you haven't done that before, then what's the alternative to that?
So
Everything in one file?
what I normally do is actually have a file for every menu. So what you could do, so let's say we have pizza, but this time we've got pizza pie. So pizza pie. So again, that's what I'd normally do. I don't think I've ever run across a case where I've had multiple files for one hook menu. But if it let's see, this file should be. I don't think you can specify multiple files for the callback. But again, I break it out per route in this case. So yeah, so that's how you do it. I'll keep typing away, but any other questions? Okay, so as an example, let's go ahead and create another. So pizza pie page link. All right, so pizza pie page. All right, so pizza pie. Need to change this pizza. Show pie. Again, since we're specifying the callback function manually, there's no hard and fast naming scheme. So I'm just going to throw pie in here. Show pizza pie page. Show pizza pie page. Pie. Okay, so let's see. Right, so if we clear cache, notice that this is something interesting. Drupal will, sometimes it'll 404 it, other times it will actually route it to the nearest request. We haven't cleared cache, so in this case, pizza should be everything. Right, so it will route anything that it can't find to the parent. But if we clear cache, we should be able to see the pie page. So, right. So that's just a quick example. So now we've got two include files. What you probably do as the code base scales is throw it into an inc folder or an include folder. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You can turn off your caching altogether with Drush if you want, so that you don't have to even go to command line.
I'd also recommend Dev Desktop too. So if you're not too familiar with the command line, there's a great thing called Dev Desktop from Acquia. It actually bundles your entire web server stack along with Drush. But as he said, if you want to, while you're developing, turn off cache, and you're familiar with Drush, then you can do it that way. Chances are, though, if you know about Drush, you probably know about module development. It's a great tool, by the way. Any other questions or points of clarification?
Is it desktop free?
Yes, it is free. Quick note though, Dev Desktop ties very well with Acquia's own hosting. Not other hostings, but for local development, it's still great. So, it's on Acquia's site. It's a good tool. Again, if you're not familiar with the command line, or you prefer a graphical interface, it will provide you the server stack. It will tie Drush with your site. You can actually spin up Drupal sites with a click of a couple buttons. Any other questions or points of clarification? Going once.
Is the callback function, move back to the,
Go.
if you haven't changed it to pizza pie, go back to your page callback.
So what happens if I had a function collision?
If you tried to include both pizza show page, scope, or is it?
Sorry, so if in this case I had it like this, or if I had it like this. So are you saying if there's a collision
Yeah, in this scenario right here
where you have two functions that are named the same, it will, let's try it out, but before we try it out, I'm gonna guess that no, that should actually work, because it should only include the inc file. So let's see what happens. So we've got two functions here that, again, this is a little confusing, but we've got two include files. Both of them have the same function name, different returns, but because it's going to load the include file for different routes, this should work. Should. Although I'd recommend against it, just because mentally you have to keep track of it. But let's see what happens. Show page, pie.inc. All right, so clear cache. Okay, so let's go to pie. Right, so this is the pie page, and then this is the pizza page. So the reason why this works is, again, Drupal's only going to load up this callback file for one route, and that's a great thing. So that's what happened. Anything else? Going, gone? Okay, thank you very much. Quick note, if you need to reference, the slides have been posted on Capital Campsite forever. You can go there, or you can also check out /sample D7 module. So on my GitHub, for a different module, Wi-Fi is killing me over here. There's a GitHub repo with an example module, and each of the diffs are one step in the process, so you can actually walk through the coding steps. Once it loads up, if it loads up. Also on there is, again, that PHP implementation of the hook system. So if I do wrap it up at 12, I think, right? Is that when I'm supposed to wrap it up? Let me double check that. 12 o'clock, is that one? Okay, so we've still got a couple minutes. While that's loading, hooks explained. Okay, so first off, here's that repo I was talking about. You can see it's a very simple module, but if we take a look at the commits, it actually steps through. So for example, we move in here, we move it to a callback file. So if you need to, I reference it. Again, it's a very simple module. So, and actually a quick note, the process of module development is really, it's all about this, but just expanded out. So figure out what you need to do, what you want to do, and then figure out the hook that can do it for you. Again, highly recommend Googling it, because the Solar search on Drupal.org really loves views. So probably your first result will be views, even if you search hooks. But if you do Google, you'll get some really relevant information. It's again, I really recommend getting into module development, because it will make you a stronger programmer. It will expose you to the parts of Drupal you might not have been exposed to before, and it will clean up your themes. So again, you can have nicely decoupled code, so that if you change themes, your site doesn't blow up. It may look different. You need to move blocks around, but functionally speaking, it will still work. I highly recommend it. And again, the slides are posted on Capital Camp, albeit in a different format. They're in a PDF. Obviously, I was using Reveal.js. So yeah, the hooks, PHP implementation of hooks. So quick disclaimer, this is not really relevant to Drupal development. You don't need to know this, but for those of you, maybe one of you out there that's curious, the way Drupal actually fires up the hook system, it uses if function exists. So in PHP, it's going to look and see if the function is loaded in global scope. If it is, go ahead and run it. So in this case, we have a very simple site. All it's doing is going to print out a message. So in this case, message, passing it in, the query string is hi. So what it's doing, it's going to print out a message. If the message isn't set, it'll default it to hello. And again, this is on GitHub too, if you're really curious. Another disclaimer, this is all changing for Drupal 8 because they're using Symfony. So this is the procedural way. Drupal 8 is going to use Symfony underpinnings. But anyway, so we take a look at the message here. We scan the modules folder. So right now we have 2 modules. This also assumes that if a module is there, it'll enable it. So we get a list of the modules. We load it into memory. And then what we do is we require once, so load up the module file into memory, and then add the module name to our module list. So again, this is a PHP implementation roughly of how Drupal does it. In Drupal's case, it would be for enabled modules. This is loading up every module possible. So in this scenario, we have a function called render, and then we have a hook that is pre-render. So that's the only hook that we have, and that's the one that is exposed. So if we take a look at one of these modules, we have module name, bar, pre-render, and we pass in the message. Again, PHP, not actually Drupal, but to give you an idea of the craziness that is Drupal's hook system. So we have a render function that gets called at the end of our bootstrap. So for each module in our module list, we're going to check first if this pre-render hook has been declared. And again, since it's loading up the module file, it's in global scope. So we're going to check if this function exists. If it does exist, run it. And then finally, we're going to print our message. And this message will be, it's returned from that function. So every time we're passing in the message. So we could either overwrite it or add to it. In this case, we're adding to it. We've also got here. So in this case, you can see the original message was hi. We've got bar, as was bar. It makes more sense, but it's basically saying I've loaded up these modules. So if we were to actually create a new module called pizza, so let's go ahead and create a pizza module for the sake of time, because you all got to see some other lovely sessions. So PHP, don't really need to do that, but I will. So pizza pre-render, we're going to actually overwrite it. So we're going to say pizza. So if that works, what we should see is pizza. Right. So again, this is a very simple PHP implementation of Drupal's hook systems if you're really curious. It's on GitHub. With that, I think we're going to wrap it up. One last call for questions or comments. No? Oh, yeah. Oh, we got some. Yes.
So you were talking a lot about how you can pull things out of your theme and put them in modules to make your theme less hellish.
Yes.
Is there anything, have you ever had to go back and remediate a theme to pull things out of it and make it less hellish, or have you only done it going forward? And if you have, do you have any funny stories?
So I haven't actually done it retroactively, although I probably should have. But going forward, I've always made it a constant thought. 2 minutes. All right, 1 minute. We got this. So quick little story about how this is relevant. We had a specific Flickr block that had specific settings. It needed to pull in from a collection, every 24 hours. So normally I'd write that, amateurly, write it in the theme. I was able to create it as a block in a module and actually extend the Flickr module. So long story short, modules are great because, again, you keep your themes clean, you keep your code clean, and everything's maintainable so that when you leave for more money, the sucker that comes in after you doesn't have to go, what's this TPL doing? So again, I highly recommend it. Thank you very much, and have a great day.